Hi, welcome to another episode of Meet the Author. We have today Jody Casella, and she wrote the book, Thin Space. Let me get a better view. I'm going to read, what is thin space? A point where the barrier between this world and the next is thin enough for a person to step through to the other side. And a little synopsis about the book. Ever since the car accident that killed his twin brother, Marshall Windsor, has been consumed with guilt and crippled by the secrets of that fateful night. He has only one chance to make amends and set things right. He must find a thin space, a mythical point where the barrier between this world and the next is thin enough for a person to step through to the other side. But when a new girl moves into a house down the street, the same house Marsh is sure holds a thin space, she may be the key, or the unraveling of all his secrets. As they get closer to finding a thin space, and closer to each other, Marsh must decide once and for all how far he's willing to go to right the wrongs of the living and the dead. So, Jody, tell me a little bit about where you got the idea for thin space and what does thin space mean?
Okay, well, thanks, Jason. I had two ideas that came together when I thought of this book. And the first one was I read something about the Celtic belief in thin places, where the wall is thinner between our world and the next world. And I thought that was kind of an interesting idea. And it was in a magazine, and I read it, and I ripped it out and carried it around in my purse for probably 5 years. It just seemed like a cool idea for a story. And around the same time, my son was in 7th grade, and to kind of put into perspective how long it takes for the publishing process, he was in 7th grade when I was thinking of this, and now he's a sophomore in college. Mm-hmm. But he was riding a bus with a boy who was barefoot, and it doesn't say on the back of the book what you just read, but in order to step into a thin space, you have to take your shoes off. Mm-hmm. So the boy in my book walks everywhere barefoot. But I saw a boy who, it was winter, and he had a coat on, but he didn't have shoes on. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was really interesting. And from a mom point of view, I was also worried about this kid, and why is he walking around in the cold weather barefoot?
And, I must say that just a couple weeks ago, before I read this book, I had been driving by Wesleyan University, and there was a student walking barefoot right down the middle of the street, and it was in the winter. And then I went back when I read the book, and I was thinking, is he looking for a thin space? But I had also seen a movie and read a book just recently about a very famous person who used to walk around barefoot, Steve Jobs.
Really?
You didn't know that?
I didn't know that. So maybe he was looking for a thin space.
Yeah, and if you watch the movie, you'll see him walking around barefoot.
Ah, okay, I'm going to have to watch that.
So we wonder about that, because he did pass away. Maybe we can bring him back.
Yeah.
Your name is Casella. Is that Irish? I mean, why did you get into the Celtic?
yeah, no. I don't know. No, I'm Italian. But the Celtic thing, I didn't know that much about it until I read that article in the magazine, and then I did some research, and it was just an interesting, I don't know Celtic mythology. I'm sure there are a lot of people who know more than I do, but what I learned about it was interesting. There's, in Ireland, like very, very Druid time period, people believed in sacred spaces, usually were water or caves, and they would mark those places off with stones. And when the Irish Christianity came into Ireland, instead of like taking away those spaces from the Druids or the pagans, they built churches on those spots. And I just thought that was, like, they just took that, like, oh, that's a sacred space for you, let's make a church.
Great idea.
Yeah.
Now, just a little bit about marketing. Like, a good place to market this would be in Salem, Connecticut, because here they have all these type of books.
Yes.
But also about marketing, let's show everybody what you have about the photo. This is really unique.
Yeah, so
hold that up for
okay, I don't know if you can see. This is...
Maybe we can zoom in. There you go.
This
Tell
is
people about that.
Yeah, this is a necklace. I am not a jewelry maker or an artist in any way, but a friend of mine, and I will say her name, is Deb Rogers from North Carolina. She was a big supporter of my writing and my book, and she, for a Christmas present as a surprise, she made the book cover, shrunk it down, and I'm not exactly sure how she did this, but she made this pendant, and I wear it when I go to book signings and libraries and school visits and always get compliments. And now she keeps making them for me to give away to fans. And we haven't charged any money or anything, but I'm thinking, oh, maybe Deb should get into the jewelry business.
Well, you know, we do talk about marketing ideas, and that's one of them we'll talk to you about tonight. Now, I was reading some reviews, and I'll pretty soon read a review about the book. But one of the things they talk about in the book, and maybe people you met, is that it has a surprise ending. And then after people read it, they say, oh yeah, I should have known that ending, but they really couldn't guess it. Have you met anybody that guessed the end?
When I was working on the book and when I worked with my editor, we did talk a lot about the ending and how to... It's not really, it is a surprise, but it's the kind of surprise, and I don't want to give too much away, but kind of like the movie The Sixth Sense, where both, it's kind of two stories going along at the same time, and you think you're reading one story, but there's really another story underlying, and you don't really want the reader to figure it out. You want them to be surprised, but you don't want them to feel cheated.
Yeah.
You want them to be able to say, oh, that all makes sense now, and then maybe even go back to the beginning and read the whole thing again to see if you did it right and it works on two levels.
Has anybody known the end?
There are people, yes, there are definitely people who figure it out. They figure it out at different points. Nobody has said to me, I mean, I haven't gotten anyone who said that they figured it out. They all say at a different part, and then there are a lot of people who get to the end, and that's when they figure it out.
So we talked a little bit before the show about, you know, do we have a surprise for you, okay? And I have a surprise for you.
Okay.
I knew the ending
Okay.
at the very beginning.
Okay.
And I said there's also a connection between this book and Wethersfield. And you're in Wethersfield now, but you don't live in Wethersfield, and you really didn't. I asked in the beginning, do you know the connection between this book or yourself in Wethersfield?
No.
But that connection is what gave me the ending of the book.
Okay.
So you don't know it, but in Wethersfield, one of my favorite books of all times was The Other.
Okay.
And The Other is a book by Thomas Tryon, who lived in Wethersfield and wrote about two brothers.
Okay.
And I won't go any further, but the people who read The Other
No.
will guess the end of this book. Basically, people who live in Wethersfield who read the book. So, without giving away too much of the, I mean, the book is going to be exciting in itself, but this book is very similar to The Other in many ways. But this is a happy version of The Other.
Well, I don't know. Is this happy?
Well, it has, you know, humorous parts. I don't think The Other was so humorous, but The Other was actually one of my favorite psychological thrillers of all time. And the interesting part is, I mean, I didn't talk about or know about the book since I read it about 25 years ago. And then just this year, I met somebody from Wethersfield when I gave a lecture who actually knew Thomas Tryon and his family because they were old-time Wethersfielders. And in the place of the book took place in Wethersfield, Connecticut. And there was a thing they called it Pequot Landing, but we got to the story because we talked about the history of Wethersfield. And it's very interesting that he told me about this. I looked up Wethersfield, looked up the book The Other. I didn't realize when I read it that it took place in Wethersfield. And then now I read this book, and it's like, this is the book you have to talk about, The Other, as a reference of that genre, which is, for many people, one of the best supernatural, psychological thrillers ever. I'd have to go with that, too. So I actually guessed the end right away.
Okay. Well, I don't know if I want to tell people to read that. No, I'm curious. I want to read it now.
It's good to catch, you know. I was wondering, well, actually, that's the question I wanted to ask you, because we are in Wethersfield and you are from Connecticut. I thought for sure you read The Other and you wanted to make another version of it.
Yeah, I know. I never heard of it.
And now we just realized you didn't read The Other, which is good because it means you didn't plagiarize.
No. Gosh, no.
Let me read a beautiful review about the book from Amazon.com. This is powerful. This is haunting. This is why I love to read. Thin Space by Jody Casella is like being trapped in a dream, and until someone finds the way to pull you out, it goes on and on. Honestly, I have read this twice. I always like it when a reader says they read it twice. It was that good, that intriguing, and I picked up even more to like about it the second time around. Grief, guilt, and loss can blur our existence, warp our perspectives, and cause us to block out the truth. While searching for unknowable answers, believing in a thin space between the living and the dead, something an elderly neighbor swore existed. Marshall, grieving over his guilt and the loss of his twin, undergoes a huge mental change that manifests itself in unusual and odd behavior. He needs to talk to his brother, make things right, but no one believes in the thin space until Maddie comes along. Does it exist? Can Marshall lay his ghost to rest? What about Maddie? Jody Casella has picked a lot of story, strong characters, and enough tear-jerking intensity into a writing that you're almost sad to get to the last page. As I said, I've read this twice and can without a doubt read number 3 on the horizon. Miss Casella has created a fresh and deeply moving story that will stick with you long after the last page, with its great pacing, well-developed characters, and a touch of the supernatural. Fantastic.
Wow, that's nice.
You didn't know about that review?
No.
You got to read your reviews.
I don't read them.
So tell us, so we heard a little bit about how you got the idea for the book. Describe a little about the journey to publication. How did you get from idea to revision to finished book on the shelf? Because this is your first book.
Yeah. Well, it's my first published book, but it's actually the 6th book that I wrote.
Oh, okay.
So I was writing for a long time.
I'm glad you said that,
Yeah.
because when I read it, I said, this is amazing. Today, writers can put out stuff like this in their first book.
Yeah.
It's like blew me away. So I'm happy you said it's your 6th book.
No, and I've published short stories.
Oh, okay.
And
so it didn't just pop out of the air. Okay.
No. So this is the 6th book, and I wrote it. I don't know if you know. I know you're a writer too. I don't know, in people who are watching the show, there's National Novel Writing Month, which is...
No, I don't know that.
Okay, so there's a site called National Novel Writing Month. It's during the month of November every year. I think it's NaNoWriMo.org, and you can sign up and you pledge to write a 50,000-word novel in 30 days. And the people who created this, I don't think were thinking of November with Thanksgiving, and just it's a small month too because it's only 30 days. But it's a good way if you're the type of writer. I used to be a perfectionist writer where I would write a sentence and I wouldn't feel like I could write the next sentence until I felt like that one was perfect. And it would take me a long time to write a book that way. And it's good. Everybody writes in a different way, but for me, I was ready to try a different way. And I thought it was good to just try to get a first draft out and not worry so much about the quality, but just get the story down on paper. And so I wrote the book in 30 days. And
wow.
Then I had to revise it many times, but it was a good way to kind of get a story out. I don't think I would have been able to think this story up logically. Well, so I didn't have an outline or anything like that.
I'm happy you said that, because one of the ways to get through writer's block and to get artists, you'll hear authors who are teaching other authors to write, they'll say, just get it down, don't worry, get the ideas down, and then later on you'll revise that. And that's exactly what you did. You just got the ideas out, didn't worry about the mistakes, and you knew that you can revise that. Your type of style, can you talk a little bit about that type of style? Is it a specific style?
I don't know.
I'll have you read the preface.
I don't know what my style is. I worked on an MFA in poetry. I don't know if my language is poetic or anything like that, but that really helped me.
It is a little, and it's exact, but it's not just.
Yeah, I'm not very wordy, I don't think. But then this is also a teenage boy's voice. It's in first person. It's kind of choppy sentences that I've written other books where I don't have that same voice.
So that's one of the critiques about the book, but actually that fits, like you said, for the age group that you're writing for, although adults will enjoy this book. But it's also a book, I was surprised to see, for a younger crowd too, for teenagers. So you don't want to overkill them with words they don't understand,
No.
concepts they don't understand.
Yeah.
So read the preface, okay?
Okay, this is the prologue to the
prologue.
book, and it's.
What's the difference between a preface and a prologue?
I don't
Since
know.
You're an English teacher.
Well, I think a preface would be...
then I'm right.
Oh, yeah, no. Okay, I'm thinking about it.
Okay.
I think a preface would be at the beginning of a nonfiction,
Okay.
like a textbook
Just
or
kidding,
something.
I don't know.
Okay, I don't know. I'm just thinking, okay.
Prologue.
Yeah, prologue. 3 months ago. Marsh. The light was bright, glaring. I tried to turn my head, but a sharp tug locked me in place. Something was clamped between my lips. It snaked down my throat so I couldn't breathe. I jerked my hands, wanting to claw whatever the hell it was away, but someone's fingers curled around mine and held them down. It's okay, a voice said. You're okay, Marsh. What? But I could only grunt the word. I forgot I couldn't move my head, and I tried to turn again, which freaking hurt. I couldn't see anything but light. It seared my eyes, so I shut them, but the light kept burning. I remembered light blazing like that. Headlights, looming brighter, closer. My hands twitched, and I felt my fingers still clamped around the steering wheel, felt my feet pounding at the brakes, saw him next to me, his mouth open, his eyes wide as the light sliced his face. A different voice said, Marsh? I forgot I couldn't talk, but I tried. Gah, I said. That hurt too. Everything hurt. My leg throbbed, my chest ached like some 250-pound defensive tackle had just slammed into it. But my head, God, the pain shot from the center of my skull and somehow also tunneled in from the outside, one all-encompassing pulsating wound. Maybe I hit the windshield too? His face was a slow-motion series of snapshots, pissed off, confused, scared, and just like that, I knew. 2 seconds earlier, I'd thought I was in pain, but that pain was nothing, because now I knew my brother was dead.
Wow,
Dun, dun,
really
dun.
Well. No, really well written. Where did that come from? That's really well written, high-class writing. Where did that
Thanks.
come from? I know you're an English teacher.
I was an English teacher.
And, practicing 6 novels, that, people write many books and they all suck. So,
Well, I don't know. I think if you keep writing many books, you're going to get better.
but did you win an award when you were in school, or did somebody say something about they liked your writing? Did you know you had this talent, let's say?
I think it's a combination of talent and working really hard in practice. I always wrote. I always read from when I was young.
Now that you bring that up, so there must have been an author that you liked their style. So you might have copied a certain author's style. Not copied, but learned or...
Well, when I was younger...
What did you like?
Yeah, when I was younger, I read all the books in the children's library in New Britain, Connecticut. And there was a librarian there who used to pick books out for me. And I liked, I'm trying to think off the top of my head, but I liked A Wrinkle in Time.
Who wrote that?
Madeline L'Engle.
And you think that that's similar writing?
No, I don't know. But, I mean, that's a book that stands out to me as a book I liked when I was younger. Charlotte's Web. These are kids' books. And I read those, and I loved falling into stories, and I wanted to write stories, too, as a child, because I thought if I like it so much, I want to I would like to create a story that other people could fall into.
It does give a feeling of somebody who's writing for younger people, definitely. When you mentioned that. Okay, so also, what's been the most surprising thing about having a book published?
Well, I've been doing this for a very long time. So I said that this is the 6th book, and even this book, the process, when I wrote the first draft, it was in 2008. And I wrote 5 or 6 revisions of the book. And when I say revisions, I mean complete revisions. I don't mean spelling or something. The book just came out in September of 2013. So it was a really long road to publication. It takes a long time to write a book. It takes a long time to find an agent. It takes a long time for an agent to find an editor. And then when I sold the book, it was in 2012. At the beginning of 2012, I signed the contract. And it's still almost 2 years before the book came out. So the process is such a long time, and I was dreaming about it for so long and imagining my book on the shelf. So when it finally is on the shelf, it's just exciting to me. I don't think I'll ever get used to, I walk into a library where I don't know the people and it's just some random town, and I walk in and there's my book, or a school or a bookstore.
No, it's a great feeling.
It's very cool.
So I have to ask you then, one of the critiques they have of publishing today versus self-publishing is that when you try to publish a book, you do go, I mean, it could take a while, even a couple years, from when you sign the contract and when it goes out, and you don't have that much control, but usually a publisher, and this is Simon & Schuster, has a very, Carly Simon's father, so has a very strong ability to promote the book, or at least to distribute it, versus somebody who is self-published has a harder time. Would you say you would have been happier to self-publish book, or are you happy that you went through this through a official publishing company?
Yeah, I researched both avenues, and I knew that self-publishing obviously would take less time to say. I really wanted to try the traditional publishing route, though, because I did want the wider distribution, and I like, for a young adult novel, you want the book to be in schools and libraries, and if you have a self-published book, you could do that, but it takes a little bit more legwork and personal connections, whereas for me, I did get a really good review right at the beginning from Kirkus, and that's a professional reviewing service.
Right.
And because I did, there are libraries and schools who automatically buy books that have starred reviews from Kirkus, and so I didn't have to do anything.
That's the secret.
Yeah,
okay.
Well, but I didn't know. That could have happened any other way. But it worked out.
I'm happy you said that. I'll tell you why. Because Kirkus is a paid review, and
it's paid by the publishing company.
But it's a paid review. And one of the complaints that many people who are giving reviews or talk about reviewing, they said, a book shouldn't be paid review. You should have the clients who read the book. Those reviews are more trustworthy. But I don't actually agree with that. I think that's important for an author to...
Kirkus, though, gives bad reviews.
Well, I mean, a professional review. It could be good, bad, or otherwise. I'm not really against a paid review, so I want to say this on television, because there are people who think a paid review is unethical, but actually it's professional, and authors who don't have a good paid review, they get a very bad review in the very beginning, and it might not be professional or might not even be just. It could ruin that author. So if you get a good paid review, the other people will just at least look at the book and decide if they're going to buy it and like it themselves. So I'm happy you said that on the basis of that.
Let me just clarify, though.
No Kirkus's.
Yeah, I was just going to clarify, though, that I don't know exactly how that works, but I think that Kirkus is a professional review service. It's been around for like 100 years, and all the publishing companies have subscriptions.
Right.
So it's not like they're paying. In other words, what happens is the publishing companies send all the books that they have coming out. Kirkus can decide to review them or not review them. So they didn't pay, they could have not even read this.
But it's still, in the end, it's still a paid review versus somebody who bought the book, because Kirkus didn't buy the book. They bought the book and then they reviewed it. So there's a big argument out there, but I'm so happy you said what you said, because that's a point that I always agreed with and supported. So thank you for that. What's been the toughest criticism you've gotten? What's been the nicest praise?
The criticism is interesting because we were talking about reviews. I thought, again, because this took so long to get to this point, I thought that bad reviews, would hurt my feelings or would be hard to take. It's not, and I think and I'm surprised at myself too, because I would think I've cried a lot over rejections and stuff. But because I was doing this for so long, I started submitting seriously and writing seriously probably 20 years ago. So over a 20-year period, I've tried to get agents, I've tried to get editors, I've gotten a lot of rejection letters. Those hurt, and I would cry over each one. This book was written in 2008. And I've written 4 other novels since then. So I love this book, and it's my story, and I'm promoting it, and I'm happy. But I don't feel the same personal feeling about it that I did when it was fresh and I had just written it. So when you read that review a little while ago, that was really nice. I had never read that, and I know there's bad reviews, and I don't read them, and I don't feel anything because there's nothing I can do about this book to fix it anyway.
I would tell somebody not to say that
sorry.
on the show, but I'm happy to say that because it's true. And actually, you said something without maybe not realizing it, but it's very important for authors. A book has to stand on its own.
It does.
And it doesn't matter where you are in time or space at the time, where you are right now as an author. The book has to stand on its own regardless of the author and where they are and what they're doing. So if the book was written 20 years ago and it's, just lasts forever, it's timeless, as they say, that's what it's all about. So if you're not in that place today, that's okay. Sure, you might have to promote it if it's not too far in time, but it should be able to promote itself. And the viewers, the readers who read it should be able to be the ones who promote that. What are you working on now?
Well, I have a few things. I did write a sequel to this book, and I wrote the sequel before I even sold this book, so I wasn't sure it would ever go anywhere, but I just did it for my own amusement and curiosity. I liked the boy in the story, and I felt like his story ended and the book didn't need a sequel, but then a few years later, I just wondered, I wonder what does happen a few minutes after this book is over, so I wrote a sequel. And so that's one thing. And then I do have another novel that I've been working on that I just keep revising. I don't want to say anything about it because I don't want to jinx it. That feels fresh to me.
Well, I read the book, and my personal feeling is, first of all, I tutor students. And I tutor high school students. And also, that's one thing. So I was able to relate to this, to the book personally, and even if you're an adult. And secondly, I also I work as a biofeedback therapist for many years, and I dealt with post-traumatic stress disorder and how you get over that. So I also was able to deal with how people have a trauma in their life and the different ways, the self-healing process, which this book talks about, or the answers you have to find in life for tough situations. And I think you handled that superbly. So for any student who has a hardship in their life, that would be a really good idea of a self-help sort of book where you're giving ideas how to move forward. I really liked it. It was very humorous. I just have one question in general. It's not for your book in particular, but one question in general. Today, I myself, I'm watching Game of Thrones. How can you not watch that? I think an author has a very hard time competing with television nowadays. The level that's coming out is so high. And an author, they put out a book that's really good, but do you feel people are going to read anymore? What is your feeling? And you being a teacher and you putting out a book for students, and it's not a book that is a how-to book per se, but it's a novel. What's your feeling about that?
Well, I think there are kids who read, obviously, and there are kids who don't read. I was at a school yesterday, and some of the kids were readers, and some admitted that they weren't. And you are competing in this society. There's a million things kids can do for entertainment. And so I just feel like I'm one facet of that. This is something they could pick up and enjoy, or maybe they're not gonna.
So here's a marketing idea. You want a school to have that as one of the books they have to read to write a book report on?
Yes, and there are schools that have done that, and it's very cool to know that.
As a tutor, I know about that because I have to read the books that I have to write book reports on. Well, anyways, so Jody, that was a really great interview. There you go. We're at the end of the show. You can sign over a copy to the author. My pleasure. Wish you all the luck with the book. I enjoyed it.
Thank you. I enjoyed being here.
Unfortunately, I guessed the end, but that's because I live in Wethersfield.
Yeah. Well, thanks very much.
Applause to that genre.